Thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. This is our second webinar related to COVID-19 issues. My name is Allyn Ayers, and I'm an attorney and the director of the LegalARTLink program at Locust Projects. So again, please make sure that you stay on mute to minimize any feedback or background noise so that everyone can hear me clearly and that the audio and the recording is clear. Due to time constraints, I'm not going to be taking live questions over audio during the presentation, but you can use that chat function to ask any questions that you have as they come up. I'll keep an eye on that chat and try to answer any questions at the end of each section of the webinar. Time permitting, I may take some chat or live questions at the end, but if we don't have time, you can always send me an email or submit a request to LegalARTLink after the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen that's going to show you the presentation for today. Okay, so again, this is our second webinar. We're going to go over updates and then two of the loans that are available, the PPP and the EIDL. In case anyone is unfamiliar with LegalARTLink, it's a program provided under the umbrella of Locust Projects offerings that aims to empower artists by providing legal information and advice for specific issues and by educating artists and empowering them to take control of their careers. Normally, we offer legal assistance to members of Locust Projects. However, in order to support the community during this public health and economic crisis, we're waiving that membership fee for access to LegalARTLink for 3 months. So if you have a specific legal issue and you need assistance and you're not currently a member of Locust Project, please don't let that stop you and don't hesitate to visit our website, locustprojects.org. Navigate to the LegalARTLink page. We have a form there where you can submit your issue. And then the final point of housekeeping before we get started with the substance of the webinar, this is a legal presentation and it does come with a disclaimer. So here it is. The materials and information provided during this webinar are for informational purposes only. They are not intended to provide a legal opinion or constitute legal advice, which must be tailored to the facts of a particular situation. Due to the novelty of this situation and the rapid changes to public health policy at the state, local, and national levels, the information provided during this webinar may not contain the most up-to-date legal or other information. Use of and access to this webinar does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and the provider, which is LegalARTLink at Locust Projects. You should consult an attorney for legal advice relating to any particular issue or problem. As I mentioned, this is the second webinar that LegalARTLink is hosting related to COVID-19 issues. In case you missed the first webinar last week, it is now available on the Locust Project's YouTube page. In that webinar, we went over contract issues related to COVID-19, ways to manage your cash flow, the recovery rebates that were created by the CARES Act, which are the direct cash payments you may have heard of, and the expansion of unemployment insurance also through the CARES Act. The purpose of this week's webinar is to provide some updates on what we covered last week and to go over the small business loans that you may want to consider. It's also been my personal experience and observation of those that I'm in contact with that after about 4 weeks now of sheltering in place, our attention span may be more limited than it was a few weeks ago. There's so much information out there and we've been extremely hyper-focused on this single issue for many weeks now, so it's understandable and normal for you to be experiencing a little fatigue. I am myself. So if that's you, I hope to be able to direct your attention and explain in detail just a few focused and important issues that are likely to affect you and to be of service to you. So this week we'll be going over some updates regarding the topics covered in the last webinar. And next we will address some of the state and local guidance and emergency orders that are known. And then finally we'll cover the two loan programs that I mentioned earlier, which are the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. First, I'll start with updates from the last webinar. I'm going to start with evictions. So last week I said that there was no statewide moratorium on evictions, and I went through the action that was taken by the Florida Supreme Court and the Miami-Dade Police Department that effectively halted evictions while we're under a state of emergency. On Thursday, April 3rd, so after the webinar or during it even, Governor DeSantis issued Executive Order 2094, which suspended evictions for 45 days from the order. So that's until May 18th. The order suspends evictions for mortgage foreclosures and for tenants, but only for tenants for the for failure to pay rent because of a COVID-19 reason. So under the governor's order, a tenant could still be evicted for another reason that, say, for example, in your lease had a provision that if certain activities or actions might constitute, if it's not a failure to pay rent, then it does not fall under the moratorium of the governor's order. However, the Miami-Dade Police Department is still not enforcing any evictions, so it would fall under the restrictions here locally. And then final order, explicitly not suspend a tenant's obligation to make rent or a homeowner's obligation to make their mortgage payments. So as the same as last week, all rent is still due and owed. You just can't be evicted for your failure to pay rent. Next update is on the recovery rebate. As a reminder, the recovery rebate is the direct payment of up to $1,200 plus $500 per child 16 or under that was established by the CARES Act. For more details, you can review last week's webinar, which I meant again is on YouTube. As with last week, there's still no web portal to input direct deposit information if you haven't received a direct deposit refund for 2018 or 2019. So I advise that you just keep checking irs.gov/coronavirus if you have not provided your direct deposit information to the IRS. I also want to clear up a misconception that I saw a lot being shared on social media over the weekend about the refund's classification as an advance tax refund. It seems like there's a lot of misinformation out there that this rebate, what you receive in this direct payment, will come out of your 2020 tax rebate, or that if you owe taxes, you will need to pay it back, but this is not accurate. So I think that this is stemming from the refund's classification as an advance tax refund. The rebate is technically an advance of a special tax credit that's approved for the 2020 tax year. It does not come out of your 2020 refund though. It's essentially an extra refund that you're just getting early instead of when you file your taxes, and you won't have to pay it back if you owe taxes. So I just wanted to clear that up because I saw a lot of shares over Facebook and Instagram over the weekend that that made people scared about this payment. Next, I want to go over some updates related to unemployment. As a quick recap, the CARES Act expanded state unemployment benefits by $600 per week and increased the time to receive benefits by 13 weeks. It also made unemployment available to independent contractors, sole proprietors, and self-employed individuals to whom it's not normally available at the state level. It's a lot out of order. Okay, here we go. So on April 2nd, Governor DeSantis issued Executive Order 2093, directing agency heads to deploy personnel to assist with reemployment assistance. This is what the Florida government calls unemployment, reemployment assistance, and it streamlines the necessary training in order to shift employees from some agencies in the government to help out with the unemployment. It also directs the DEO to make available paper applications due to problems that they were having with the website and phone applications, and to procure additional capacity, software, technology, and/or other resources. So in the past few days, the state has added at least 72 additional servers to help with the flow on its website, and has reassigned more than 2,000 state employees to help out with processing these claims. So hopefully this will help to speed up the processing of the high number of claims that they're seeing. The paper application is now available in English, Spanish, and Creole. It's available at www.floridajobs.org. You would print out that paper application, fill it out, and then mail the form to Tallahassee. DEO does warn, however, that paper applications could potentially take longer to process than completing an online application. So I would advise that you actually visit the new website. So within the past day, DEO unveiled a new website to process unemployment claims. And you can find it at the URL here. It's on the floridajobs.org website /RA application. The new website is mobile friendly, so you don't, it's much easier to use on a tablet or smartphone than the previous website. And I don't know if anyone here has had a chance to visit the website or has successfully made a claim through it, but I did create an account earlier this morning and I found it pretty easy to use. The webpage loaded quickly and I was able to navigate the whole application without any loading issues. By contrast, last week when I was checking out the Connect website, it took several minutes for each page to load. So at least for now, it appears that this website, at least this morning, was handling the traffic that it was getting. This was about at 9:30 this morning. So if you if you decide that filing for unemployment benefits is what's going to benefit you the most at this time, and you haven't yet done so, I think this new website should make it easier. The processing times for completed applications is still quite long, so you're still probably going to see at least a 4-week period before actually receiving funds. Okay, next I just want to go over an update. It's really just one update at the state and local level about something I didn't get a chance to talk to last week, and that's the current status of guidance related to wearing masks in public that has changed dramatically within the last week, and especially at the local level. So first, the purpose of these new guidelines is to prevent the unintentional spread of COVID-19 by infected people who are asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic and capable of spreading the virus. To be clear, this measure is intended to protect the people around you from you potentially unknowingly spreading the virus, rather than protecting you from ingesting it. So just be aware of that distinction. It is important to note that the mask for the purposes of this conversation means a cloth covering of the nose and mouth, which includes homemade masks or other coverings such as a bandana or a scarf. The general public is directed not to use medical face masks such as the N95 respirator masks, which are in short supply and should be reserved for healthcare workers who are coming into direct contact with COVID-19 patients. The current guidance from the CDC is now that the CDC recommends wearing face coverings in public settings where other social distancing measures are difficult to maintain. So for example, grocery stores and pharmacies, especially in areas of community-based transmission, like we have here in South Florida. As of earlier today, Miami-Dade County did not have a countywide order requiring people to wear masks in public, but did encourage people to wear a cloth facial covering consistent with the current CDC guidelines, including cloth masks, and they issued that advisory on April 4th. However, several cities within Miami-Dade County are now requiring masks in certain public places. The City of Miami Beach issued an order that became effective on April 7th, stating that employees and customers of grocery stores, pharmacies, and restaurants shall be required to wear a form of covering over their nose and mouth at all times while inside the grocery store, pharmacy, or restaurant facility. All individuals providing delivery services shall wear a form of covering over their nose and mouth while making deliveries. Yesterday, April 8th, the city manager for the City of Miami issued Order 2007, requiring masks covering the nose and mouth in grocery stores, convenience stores, pharmacies, retail food facilities, and on construction sites. The order also applies to people making food or grocery deliveries, and that order went into effect at midnight last night. So it is now required to cover your nose and mouth in the City of Miami and Miami Beach when going to grocery stores, pharmacy stores, and when getting food. As of earlier today, other cities in Miami-Dade County with current orders urging or requiring facial coverings in certain public spaces include Aventura, Cutler Bay, and Homestead. So if you live in one of those areas, be sure to check with your city's webpage regarding its current emergency orders, and also be on the lookout for further orders that might be coming down at this county or city level. All right, so next we'll get into the small business loans, and we'll cover two loan options that are available. I do want to say that these are new programs and the guidance on these is rapidly changing. So the information is based on the statute, the CARES Act, and statements issued by governing agencies. However, new rules and policy changes have been implemented in the past week or so. So it's entirely possible that through the implementation of these programs, things may change, and that the information that I'm giving to you today may not continue to be accurate, or even might have changed already. We'll start with the Paycheck Protection Program. Many of you have likely heard of this program, also known as PPP, which has been getting a lot of attention. So Section 1102 of the CARES Act authorized $349 billion in federal funds to establish a small business loan program called the Paycheck Protection Program. It is intended to cover expenses 8 weeks from the loan origination and to incentivize employers to maintain their payroll levels and allows the loan to be fully forgiven if the borrower uses funds for certain purposes. It authorizes loans to small businesses used to pay employees during the COVID-19 crisis. All businesses, including nonprofits, sole proprietors, self-employed individuals, and independent contractors can apply, so long as they have 500 or fewer employees. Again, the purpose of this program is to encourage small business employers to keep payroll levels at the same pre-crisis level. So that's going to include the employee headcount, how many people are on the payroll, as well as the compensation levels, so how much people are getting paid up to $100,000 during this crisis. This webinar is going to take a particular focus on how the PPP applies to independent contractors, sole proprietors, and self-employed individuals, because that's how many artists are operate their business. If you have another corporate structure and have questions, please feel free to reach out to me after the webinar. The types of businesses that qualify for these loans are very extensive and much broader than the typical small business authority loans. The businesses must have been in operation on February 15th, 2020, so before the crisis. It applies to small businesses, 501c3 nonprofits, veterans organizations with fewer than 500 employees, And as I mentioned before, also sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals. The loan amount is calculated by determining the lesser of 2.5 times monthly payroll costs, which includes employee compensation up to $100 in the 12 months prior to the loan application, and $10 million. So the lesser of 2.5 of what employees are being paid and the cost thereof, and $10 million. So for artists, that's generally going to be that first option. Payments to contractors do not count as payroll for PPP. PPP cannot be used to pay contractors and be forgiven. So this is in contrast to some of the initial information that was given last week, but they've clarified now that employee compensation is what's talked about here, not contractor compensation. To determine the average monthly payroll cost, sole proprietors will look at your schedule for your 2019 tax returns. We discussed last week that the 2019 tax deadline was extended until July 15th. In order to take advantage of the PPP, a lot of lenders are requiring 2019 tax documents. So if you haven't yet filed, but don't have the money to pay any tax obligations that you owe, you can file now and wait to pay until that July 15th deadline. So you can get your tax documents in to have for your PPP application and continue to defer that payment through July. For independent contractors, you're going to gather your form 1099 miscellaneous for prior 12 months. And for the average monthly payroll cost, you'll just divide those by 12. For self-employed individuals, they'll look at your payroll tax filing. And for LLCs who are taxed as pass-through taxation, you'll look at the net profits that were passed through from the LLC to your individual taxes. Again, this loan is intended to cover expenses for the 8 weeks following the loan origination. Here are the loan terms, and this applies to the amount that's not forgiven. I will get into forgiveness of this loan next. So for any amount that's not forgiven, the interest rate that accrues is 1%, and it begins accruing from the disbursement. There are no fees for the loan that's provided for in the CARES Act. There's no collateral or guarantee required. So you don't have to tie your property or give a personal guarantee on the loan. There's an automatic deferment for 6 months. That means you don't have to start making payments on the loan for 6 months after it's dispersed, although interest does accrue during this period. And the term of the loan is 2 years, so it'll be repaid within 2 years. These loans are administered by banks rather than through the federal government directly. You can visit SBA.gov to see a full list of approved lenders and search those that are close to you, or contact your bank directly. Some banks are not allowing applications from those without whom the bank does not already have an existing relationship. So if you are looking for a lender that you don't already have a relationship with, just be aware that they might have restrictions on who can file an application. Timing for application. So for small businesses, so that'll be LLCs, including LLCs, corporations, and other businesses, including nonprofits and sole proprietors, the applications are currently available and have been since April 3rd. For independent contractors and self-employed, applications should be made available starting April 10th, so that's tomorrow. tomorrow? Yes, tomorrow. You must apply before June 30th, although it is, you should decide if you're going to apply for the PPP, if it's right for you, and do so as soon as possible because the amount of total funding is limited. So if it runs out, it runs out, even if it's before that June 30th deadline. Okay, so here's on the forgiveness, which has been what's generating the most attention for this loan program. So the full loan amount, the entire amount that you take out can be forgiven, and you don't have to pay it back at all if you use the funds for certain purposes and also maintain your employment levels and compensation. The effect of this is that it essentially converts the amount from a loan to a tax-free grant. Forgiveness is not automatic, and you will have to apply for it and provide documentation. We don't know at this point exactly what that process will look like, and it might vary by lender, but you should expect that the scrutiny will be rigorous. So if you do apply for this loan, just be aware that you will have to document everything significantly and extensively. So to have the loan forgiven, you have to fulfill certain conditions. You must spend at least 75% of the loan amount on payroll, and that's going to include compensation as well as sick leave, health benefits, insurance premiums, so salaries and benefits used for employee compensation. The remaining 25% can be spent on interest payments on mortgage or other debt incurred before February 15th, 2020, and also on rent and utilities for business purposes. If you have a home business, you would prorate the amount of your home based on the square footage that is used as that home office, the way that you do on your taxes. If you spend more than 25% on those other items, the overage will have to be repaid. You'll also have to document these expenditures when you apply for forgiveness. So like I said, this is going to require a lot of documentation, and I'd recommend that you consult with an accountant about how to keep track of these funds and best practices to do so. You have to also maintain the same number of full-time employees. For most independent contractors, this should be easy as you're probably your only full-time employee. However, if you do employ others and you decrease the headcount on payroll, the forgiveness will decrease proportionally. However, if you hire additional employees, the forgiveness does not increase, so that it only goes in one direction. You must also maintain your employees' wage and salary levels up to 75% of the most recent quarter, up to a $100,000 annual salary. If you decrease the compensation by more than 25% or pay more than $100,000, then the forgiveness amount will be decreased accordingly. Any layoffs or wage decreases can be cured by June 30th and still count for forgiveness. So if you rehire people who you've laid off or increase compensation that you've cut due to lack of funds, you can still use the PPP funds to bring those back to their pre-COVID-19 levels, and that won't count against you. Any amount that is forgiven is not taxable, so it just the loan gets canceled and you do not have to declare it as taxable income. And again, I just need to stress that the documentation of your expenses here is extremely important. You don't want to be required to pay back a portion of this loan that you expected to be forgiven. So that's how the loan is supposed to work. But like with a lot of the emergency measures that we've been taken, the actual rollout and implementation has been messy, to say the least, and there have been significant issues with the rollout of this program as well. Banks are saying that they don't have sufficient guidance to be able to process these applications, and they're slow in processing the high load that they're receiving, or they're not yet offering applications to their customers. It's hard to predict when funds will be dispersed and what these procedures look like. Some, like I said before, some lenders are limiting applications to those with whom they have an existing relationship. So I'd recommend that you start with your bank that you use for business to see if they're offering this program if you're interested in applying. There's also been discrepancies among lenders in terms of the documentation they need. Some lenders are requiring 2019 taxes to be filed, some are not. Some are accepting other forms of income proof like invoices or checks, and some are requiring 1099s. So exactly what you will need to provide will be determined by who you are using as the lender. There's also some other things to consider when you decide whether you should apply. You cannot receive PPP and unemployment benefits at the same time. So if you get a PPP loan to make up for your lost income as an independent contractor, you can't also be receiving unemployment benefits. So in order to determine which is the best for you, you should essentially just do the math on this and see which is going to provide you with more weekly funds. So you want to determine what your weekly PPP salary is going to be, and to find that out, you'll start with your loan amount. So that's going to be that 2.5 times your average monthly payroll for the past 12 months. So calculate the average salary for 2019 based on your total 1099 miscellaneous forms or your net profits and divide by 12. You'll then multiply that by 2.5. Again, this loan is meant to cover 8 weeks after disbursement. So in order to determine your weekly amount, you'll then divide that total amount by 8. If that number is less than 600, you may be better off with unemployment. Although you should keep in mind that unemployment payouts are taxable, whereas if this amount is forgiven, it's not taxable. And then, like I said before, documentation and other requirements. Just make sure that you're ready to handle that, because again, you don't want to be stuck paying back this loan that you thought was going to be forgiven if you can consider other options here, for example, unemployment benefits. Okay, so that was the PPP. I didn't see any chats come in, so I'm just going to go ahead and go on to the EIDL. It looks like we will have some time for questions at the end today. So this is the last section, and then we can open it up for a Q&A at the end. So the EIDL. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan is another emergency loan provided through the SBA. It has broader uses, and you apply directly with the Small Business Administration. Aside from the emergency advance, which I will cover first because it has the most attention, it is not forgivable. So this one is more like a traditional loan aside from that advance, which you probably have heard of by now. I'll first go over that advance. Like I said, it's when you're receiving the most attention. So small businesses, including sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed persons, and eligible private nonprofits applying for an EIDL can request an advance of up to $10,000 on the full loan amount. This is supposed to be made available within 3 days of the application. although it's called an advance, the CARES Act actually calls it an emergency grant, and it does not have to be repaid. You must check the box in the SBA application that states, I would like to be considered for an advance of up to $10,000 in order to receive the advance. It's on the last page of the application before you hit submit. And it is, when I looked at it, it was in a larger font than the rest of the page. So it's hard to miss, but make sure that you don't, because if you don't check that box, you won't be considered for this advance. While generally the funds you receive with the EIDL can be used for items in a more expansive manner than what is restricted by the PPP, the EIDL Advance funds can only be used for paid sick leave for employees, maintaining your payroll, meeting increased costs to obtain materials. So if your vendors are providing material at a higher shipping cost due to delays, or say you need to buy toilet paper for your business, and as we know, there's been markups on that, you can use the advance fund to pay for those increases in price due to COVID-19. Making rent or mortgage payments, again, if it's a home office that we're talking about, you prorate the amount of your total rent based on the square footage of that home office relative to the entire home. And repaying obligations you cannot meet, that cannot be met due to revenue losses. So this is a little bit broader as well. You can use this to pay independent contractors where you can't with the PPP. However, if you are also receiving a PPP loan, you can get both, but you cannot use them for the same purpose. Again, the advance does not have to be repaid, but if you receive the PPP as well, the amount of your advance for the EIDL is deducted from the forgiveness amount. So essentially the amount that you receive in advance, you'll have to repay through the PPP if you get both. So the law provides that applicants can request up to $10,000. However, due to high demand, the SBA has scaled back that amount based on the number of employees that the business has for a total advance of $10,000 max. So although so this is a change from what was initially reported, that everyone would be able to request that $10,000. In fact, the law says that the advance shall not be more than $10,000, but doesn't guarantee that amount. So due to the high demand on this loan and on this advance, SBA is calculating the grant amount by the number of employees. So that's going to be $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. So if you are an independent contractor filing on your own behalf, you are one employee and the amount of your advance will be $1,000. The law provides that the applicant is to receive the advance within 3 days of the application. However, SBA was overwhelmed with the applications, and this is simply not happening. The statements made this week suggest that funds are supposed to be start being deposited this week or next. But again, there's an extremely high demand, and at this point, we just don't know what the status of the timing is going to be on these funds. You can apply, this is the website where you can apply COVID-19. Oops, there should be a relief. RELIEF at .sba.gov. Okay, there's a question in the chat. Do 1099s count as employees for the purposes of EIDL? I'm going to assume that means people who are paid with a 1099. So, so if you are paying people with a 1099, you can use the advance funds to make those payments. They do not count as full employees, however, for the purposes of receiving the amount. So you can use the amount to pay those people, but they're not going to count those people to increase the advance that you're receiving. I hope that answers the question. Okay, so again, this website has a typo in it. It should be COVID-19 relief, so a little E in there, .sba.gov. If you only employ independent contractors, but you're paying yourself, you are the sole employee. So you are eligible for the EIDL, but you're considered one employee. Okay, so that was the advance. This is also a general loan program. So I'm going to go over those terms as well. So the amount of this loan is up to a maximum of $2 million and that's the amount that you're eligible for is determined by the SBA based on your operating expenses. It is not forgivable other than the amount of the advance, which does not have to be repaid. The non-advance amount may be used to cover any business expenses due to COVID-19. So unlike with the PPP where you can't pay independent contractors, with this you can pay independent contractors with the funds that you receive. And the SBA will perform a credit check and verify ability to pay. So they may deny loans based on that check. The terms of the loan, there is a 3.75% interest rate or a 2.75% for nonprofits, and interest accrues from the disbursement. There's an automatic 1-year deferment, so you don't have to start making payments on this loan for a year after you receive it. However, interest is accruing during that time. The loan term is up to 30 years, so you can spread out those payments over a much longer time than the PPP. And there's no personal guarantee required for loans up to $200,000. Remember, the PPP does not require a personal guarantee at all. A personal guarantee means that if your business cannot defaults on the loan, that the lender can go after your personal assets. And there's also no collateral required for loans up to $25,000, but there is collateral required after that. So the SBA may take out a lien on any property that you own. And again, that's not required with the PPP. Okay, so that covers those loan programs. I am happy to take questions on what we covered today, either through the chat or if you unmute yourself and ask questions over the air. I'd also be interested if anyone has any other topics that they'd like to have discussed. I think we're going to try to make these webinars a weekly thing, and I'd love to know what you want to hear about most. All right, if there's no questions, unless I'm not hearing anyone. If there's no questions, I think that
we can go ahead and end this here. If you have any questions that you'd like to discuss with me individually, feel free to email me. Again, my email address is legalink@locustprojects.org. Or if you have any suggestions on topics that you'd like to have covered in these webinars, I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Please stay safe. And thank you again for joining us.